So, okay, everybody, thank you for being here. And I'm going to go down the line. We've already introduced Wiley. Malvina, I don't think that you need much of an introduction, but will you introduce yourself anyway, please?
Sure. Hi, I'm Malvina. I work at the FDA.
Understated. Kuldev.
Yeah, I'm Kuldev Singh. I work at Stanford University. I'm a glaucoma and cataract doctor.
Keeley.
Keeley Puls-Boever, Executive Director at True North Contract Research.
Phil.
Phil Desjardins. I'm a partner at Arnold & Porter. I do regulatory and reimbursement law, but formerly with CDRH, formerly with J&J. I've spent a lot of time in this space.
Raj.
Rajpal, Chief Medical Officer at J&J Vision, and I practice in the Washington, D.C. area, and I'm currently the industry representative for the ophthalmic device panel.
Got it. And so this is great, and this should be lively, and you guys should interrupt me and maybe even each other and ask each other questions if you feel like my questions are too boring or too soft or whatever it is, because all of these people, yeah, right. Don't ask me questions, ask each other questions. And all these people stuck around for, probably one of the highlights of all Eyecelerator. So Malvina, I'm going to start with you. What are your best 2 or 3 tips to work with the FDA efficiently, in the top 2 or 3 to avoid? So one of the things that's a challenge in this space is that FDA approval is a binary event. And so if you get a no, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes you're dead. And unlike, and it's hard to pivot from there. And so and it can be a long process, and people have to put in money up front and then not know what's going to happen until years later. So the question, again, couple of tips on how to work with FDA efficiently and what to avoid.
Okay, so I know you heard this often, but come talk to FDA early. And when I say early, everybody takes it to mean different things. So some people think early means when I'm ready to submit to the FDA. That is not what I mean by any means. What I mean, come talk to us early, is when you have that grandiose aha light bulb that you wake up in the middle of the night and you say, that's what I'm going to do for the next 20 years. That's the time to, well, take a little time to think about what exactly you're going to do before you come talk to us. But that, delineate what it is you want to do, what is the patient population, what are the markets that you hope to reach, in which setting do you want this device to be used, and then come talk to us. So I'm going to actually go back to something Wiley says, which is very rare. So he talked about the fact that some people have idea of a black box, and then and coming to talk to us will hopefully show you that there is direction that you can take. The other thing that I'm going to go back to Wiley's comments is, we know, he also says we can tell you, he could, well, actually, we do things differently than Wiley. But one of the things I think that you said was that you regretted not being able to tell people that you've seen things fail before. So that is true. We cannot say it either. However, I'm extremely proud of the team I have, with a lot of experience, and we have all seen quite a number of Titanics. And while we can't tell you the name of the Titanic, what we do tell you is, if you delineate the questions in the pre-submissions, the feedback we would give would be, please take a look at this and consider X, Y, Z. And very often people think that it's superfluous, but it's all based on all of the Titanics that we have seen. I can keep talking, but I think other people want to talk.
I just have one follow-up question. So, as an entrepreneur, I understand coming early, but we're scared that we're going to hear something we don't want to hear. And so
don't ask the question.
Yeah, right. And so what's the right way to come early? And you talked about saying, hey, you got to be a little bit, have your ducks in a row. Is the key getting the right consultant? Because what does a young doctor entrepreneur know about anything with interacting with the FDA? So come early, but specifically come with what?
So come specifically with your idea of what you want to do, for whom and where.
Okay.
It does not mean hire an expensive consultant. And no offense to consultants in the audience, but a lot of people charge for not an excellent advice. So
I won't ask the. There was one person clapping in here. I heard him somewhere. They must have overspent on a consultant and didn't get
and you know, along the same lines,
advice they wanted.
I think one other mistake that a lot of people make is a CEO sends in a consultant and doesn't attend or read the minutes, and then gets back what the consultant tells them FDA said, which is a third-person interpretation, very often based to benefit consultant more than anybody else.
Got it. And
I want to add one thing. When interacting with the FDA, make sure you understand the why. The agency always has a reason why they're giving you particular advice. Ask what the why, if you don't already understand the why, ask what the why is.
So not productive to just say FDA seems like they're being ridiculous on this issue. Find
There
out.
probably is a reason
It helps
why.
your blood pressure.
Yeah, I've had my blood pressure going all over the place. Feels great. Thanks for approving some drugs for that, by the way. Okay, Kuldev, same question to you, or similar to you that I asked Malvina. You know, you've interacted with FDA, lots of companies, lots of years. What's your perspective as a clinician on the do's and don'ts for working with FDA?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, John, you know, the different centers are almost like different agencies. So CDRH, Devices and Radiologic Health, where Malvina works, different team than CEDAR, where Wiley used to work, and CBER, Center for Biologics, which is exploding now because there's so many biologics, especially in ophthalmology. They're all different. But one thing I think they all have in common is in ophthalmology, we're fortunate that we can actually talk to people directly and ask them questions. And we have very engaged people at these centers. And Wiley and Malvina are great examples of that. People who come to our meetings, make themselves available. And I agree with Malvina. Sometimes, you know, consultants are like divorce lawyers. You know, they basically are making money to prolong the process or make it more difficult than it needs to be. And if you go directly to the center and have a conversation with them, you will save time and money, and you're more likely to end up in the right place. So
the do is reach out early, go straight to the center. What's the don't?
The don't is, if you are an ophthalmologist with strong expertise in a subject matter, if you now work for the company as a CEO or CMO, when you go in the room with the FDA, remember that the FDA sees you as a member of the company, and bring friends in ophthalmology who are your peers but actually don't work for the company, particularly people that these different centers have relationships with and respect, and have them illustrate, talk about the unmet need, talk about what you're trying to do as independent individuals. Even though you yourself may feel like you can serve that role, it's better to have other people. And this is a common mistake I see people making, is saying, hey, look, I'm a cornea specialist. I don't really need to have a cornea expert join me in my pre-sub meeting or my end of phase 2 meeting or whatever the meeting may be. But it is good to have those people there.
And is that a credibility issue with the CEO, Chief Medical Officer, founder? Is that the issue that you see with FDA, or is it, or what is the issue with having the?
Well, I think it's just partly that, you know, there'll be a lot of people in the room, and some of them may know who you are and what you've done, but at the end of the day, you're someone who now works for the company. Your primary job, your role at that point, is to deliver on an investment and bring a product to market, and ultimately, it's a different kind of role than someone coming in who may have similar expertise to yourself, but that can come in and say, hey, I have patients that have this problem, and this product is going to solve that problem. And if it's someone who's prominent and well respected by the center, then I think that will weigh heavily in your favor, and in the long run.
If I can just add, you told me I can.
Yeah. Go after him.
No, it's not after him. It's to add to what he said, actually. I think I want to expound on what Kuldev said. I think what's incredibly useful to us is when the clinician comes showing the consensus statement of a professional organization or a global collaborative community or some kind of a valued entity that came together and came up with appropriate clinical endpoints for that type of a device. That's the ultimate. So, very often people ask me, how is it that IDX was the first ever AI to be out of FDA for any product area? And part of it is because AAO had very, very strong preferred practice patterns that clearly delineated what is recommended for diabetic retinopathy, and we could use that, and we could cite that, and we can use that as a benchmark. And that's why, I have been doing so much work on trying to get consensus statement, and I had the pleasure of working with Kuldev on many different projects, and that's how a lot of MIGs made to market is because of the work we did together with AGS and all of the workshop. And I don't know, Kuldev, if you want to say anything else about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think CDRH has been excellent at, one of the things about devices is that some of the pathways are so complex. And I think CDRH has done a really good job in creating these networks of experts and these relationships with societies, because you can't have all that subject matter expertise internally. You need to hire 30 ophthalmologists or more. And I think drugs are different to some extent. So I think these collaborations and partnerships have really been helpful. And these leapfrog guidance documents, for example, that we've had in the glaucoma arena, where CDRH says, hey, this is an exploding area. We want to give some guidance to companies innovating here. And then having workshops and and having guidance that comes from these workshops that creates a roadmap for companies innovating has been tremendous. And CDER is different. I think with drugs, there are other challenges, and Wiley pointed out some of those challenges. And I think the biggest challenge right now for CDER, and for actually all of FDA, is there's an explosion of combination products, drug-device combos, biologic device combos. And there's an office of combination products that doesn't really do reviews. They just are an intake mechanism, and then they tell you where you need to go, and that often takes a long time, and there are lots of I's to dot and T's to cross sometimes.
It's changing very rapidly.
It is, and I just, this last, in January, we have a meeting before JP Morgan, HCC, where Jeff Shuren, Patricia Cavazzoni, and Peter Marks were on a panel. And I was able to ask them the question, hey, are combination products working? And there was consensus that they weren't working. And what Peter actually said was, just send your products to whichever center you think they should be at, and don't go through that process. And I said, well, why don't you just tell people they can do that? Well, and Jeff pointed out something that Wiley alluded to also, is the law says you can't do that. And so even the center directors are limited by law, and these are the kinds of things that I think are nuances that you can get information from particular people that work at the different centers on how to navigate, but only if you engage them. If you don't engage them, you would never know that you can save 6 months by going directly to CDER or CDRH and not going to the Office of Combination Products, who will send back your form saying, hey, you didn't do this, send it again, and we're really busy, we'll get back to you in 6 months, even though they're not going to review it. They're going to ultimately send it to another center.
Yeah, interesting. So you guys both, we talked about the value of consultants, or lack thereof, a little bit. Phil Desjardins, Dan, you're an attorney, or are you a consultant?
The line is gray. The line is gray, John.
Okay, got it. So you're not going to answer if you're a consultant or an attorney or both.
A good attorney will say the answer always depends. So.
Yeah, right. So you've worn some really interesting hats. You were at CDRH, and how long were you there?
I was there for 10 years.
Okay, and then you went to J&J, and what was your role there?
So I ran regulatory affairs for a number of businesses, not our vision business necessarily, but in a variety of different areas, as well as policy shaping roles. So working with Congress, with the agency, as they were developing, how do they roll out, and what should new policies be?
Got it. And now you're at Arnold and Porter, and your role there is?
I help companies get through FDA. Early
Sounds
on,
like a
how did
consultant.
they come to the agency? John, you caught me in the trap. I saw this one coming a mile away.
Okay, very good. So, kind of same question to you. What's your advice for the do's and don'ts for working with FDA?
So I can only echo on the do's. Coming to the agency early, I think, is really valuable, but for a slightly different reason. It's what I think both of the agency representatives or former agency representatives alluded to is there's often things that they can say, and absolutely listen to what they tell you, but also to listen to what they're not saying. They are identifying the icebergs that took down the Titanics ahead of you. And it doesn't mean you can't get through there and there's not a successful pathway forward, but they are trying to, and often do, point out what are the things that we need to be worrying about as we continue on this journey. So one of the biggest watch outs that I have for clients when we're coming in there is we need a certain degree of sort of hubris. We don't know everything that's out there. We know a lot about our products. We know a lot about how we've tested them thus far. What we don't know is what are the regulatory, legal challenges that maybe other companies or products have faced, or what are some of the other things that maybe they're seeing in the market for products that are already out there that we're not aware of. So anytime I'm coming into the agency, I often counsel my clients, we know as much about our product as we possibly can, but we know less than the agency about what's happening in the ecosystem, what's happening with other products, and what's happening and impacting patient and public health right now. So that's where I often look is, what is FDA not saying, and what are they signaling to us about the journey that's ahead of us? Because I fundamentally believe the agency is trying to get new, innovative, safe, and effective products on the market, but they're trying to lay out what are the landmines that we need to avoid.
And so so you're a doctor with an idea, you're thinking about it every morning when you wake up, you just say, I believe in this. So, there's kind of some traditional regulatory consultants. You could work with Mark Leahy at Medical Device Manufacturers Association. You could go to somebody like you. Where does the person start? Or do they just start with an email to one of these guys?
Well, I think they start with doing the research themselves. You can go to a consultant, you can go to a lawyer, you can go to Mark, you can go to me, and we've done it 100 times, and we can tell you the answer pretty quickly. But you're really only going to understand it when you do some of that research yourself. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're somebody with an idea, thinking through reading the FDA guidance documents, looking at similar products, and trying to gain publicly what was the process that they went through. Part of it is simply just understanding at a very high level, how does FDA operate? Which center am I dealing with? What are reasonable timelines? I've got an idea. Is it reasonable to expect I'm going to be in clinical trials a year from now? Is it reasonable to expect I'm going to be selling my product 6 months from now? Those are things that I think companies can very much gain on their own. What I will say is one of the values that any client that's coming into me is asking the question, do we, and maybe when do we want to get in front of the agency? If you're ultimately going to have to go through FDA, whether it be through CDER or CDRH, my advice is often, what are the unknowns before we get to that submission process? And assuming there are some, and there almost always are, how do we answer those questions? Sometimes it's through publicly available information that I or Mark or many other people can tell you, but oftentimes it's going directly to the agency. And oftentimes people are concerned, how is this going to slow me down? It's going to take me 3 months to get this meeting set up with Malvina. I don't have those 3 months. And what I often say is, if we're having this conversation a year before that submission is ready, we don't need to wait until the submission's ready to have that conversation. Let's have that conversation now while you're doing your bench testing, while this is just an idea, so that we make sure the first time we go in front of them and the formal time when the actual submission goes in, we've got all the right information ready to go, and we've got as many of those unknowns answered so that we're not getting surprised by the questions that FDA raises.
And I just want to jump in here and emphasize the importance of what he just said, because, a lot of the information, you don't necessarily have to wait for a meeting with me or my team. A lot of it is on the web. So for example, just hypothetical, if you're going to come up with a new IOL, it will behoove whoever is thinking of it to actually get on the website and see all of the standards and guidances, all the preclinical, clinical, it's all up there. So figure out what it is that was needed for 100 other products before you start asking a million questions, because that might actually pivot you very early on, because you might figure out that preclinical test that's being asked for everybody is something you need to do and figure out before you proceed to the next step and waste a lot of time and money.
Completely agree.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Keeley, you started out as an ophthalmic technician, and now you had a CRO, and you, between here and there, you ran, how many FDA pivotal trials were you in the trenches for?
Just north of 100.
Okay, so what's interesting about you up here is you were in the deepest part of the trenches, measuring eye pressure, you know, doing the work of the AEs, making sure it's documented the right way. And so you were feeling the work burden of whatever was requested, and now you're on the back side of that helping, you know, companies design studies. So how do you think about you know, designing a trial, the feasibility of it, and balancing what you believe the FDA is going to want to have, need to have, nice to have, with the arduous task of doing the work of a clinical trial?
Yeah, so I'd echo what everybody said on the panel. Meet with the agency early, definitely. Also enlist a site or two, not the PI, not the surgeon necessarily, but the site coordinators, and ask if that work can actually be done. We've had so many protocols come to us, and they've already got approval to move forward with the study, and the clinician's like, no, like, we can't do this to our patients. This is gonna take way too long. It's too strenuous on the patient. This just doesn't work. So enlist some sites and really get all of your information before you move forward, and make sure you can execute once it's ready to go.
So question for Wiley and Malvina. How much do you guys care about how easy or not easy it is to do, you know, these trials, the feasibility?
I care very much, because, I mean, unless the trial can be done, the device can't get to market. And the main reason I'm there is because I want to see innovation. So yeah, we care. And there's always a way to figure out how to make it possible. So we get these requests all the time, and they're considered minor protocol modifications that, I don't know, I don't know the number, but we get at least 20 a month, and you know, we just figure out how to make it work. It's very important that the trial is doable. So again, for all of you who are in the midst of doing a trial and think that you're stuck, don't assume that there's no way to modify it. You just need to come in and send in a proposal for modification, explain why, and explain how that's not going to impact the validity of the clinical study.
But if you have the site review it first, you don't ever have to go through that stage.
Say that again, Keeley?
Get them involved first. Get
Yeah.
the sites involved first, because then you never have to go through.
You're absolutely right. That would be the smart way
Yeah.
to do it.
And I think that you said something really, really important, which is ask the people doing the work,
Right.
you know, the actual technicians or the doctor. But oftentimes the doctors will just say, yeah, we can do this, but we don't actually know what the depth of that work is either.
Right.
You would never do that.
Yeah, I have done that before. And so, Wiley, anything to add about feasibility of studies?
No, the Center for Drugs fully agrees. If you wear the patient out, you don't get reliable answers.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Yeah, got it. And okay, so Keeley, one more question for you. So we've got a lot of small startup companies that are hoping to get into their, you know, clinical trial. How much is it going to cost them?
Okay, that's a really hard question. There's so
I didn't
many.
come for the easy questions.
Yeah,
they came
thanks.
for the hard ones.
There's so many variables in running a clinical trial, right? Is there going to be a reading center? Is there PK? What goes on to it? But simple back of the napkin math is for every single patient visit, figure it's going to be about $1,000 for what you're going to pay a site-ish.
So every patient visit day, so if there's 20 visits across the course of the study?
This is very general, very, very general, but yes. So say that in your whole study, there's 100 visits. That's it, small study. So $1,000 per visit is what you're gonna pay the site.
And that's just to the site, okay.
Times that by 4 or 5, and that's roughly what it's gonna cost to run a clinical trial just at, you know, hiring the people to do the monitoring data, all of the stuff there. That's not manufacturing the drug or device or any of that. That's just actually running the trial.
Raj, how does that land on you? Does that seem about right?
Yeah, I think it varies tremendously, as Keeley said. For example, a lot of the contact lens trials that we run at J&J are much easier to do, shorter duration, but some of the IOL trials, yeah, much more than that. And thinking back to other studies that I've been involved in as a clinician, I mean, some of those studies, you have so many follow-up visits that the cost can be exponentially higher.
So Raj, you know, you're at J&J now, Chief Medical Officer at J&J. You worked closely, I think Chief Medical Officer at Avedro, do I have that right? Okay, so Avedro had some challenges going through FDA. And I think that it'd be instructive to some of these small startups to talk about those challenges and how ultimately they were overcome.
Sure. So I think first, I was fortunate that they were before I joined, for the most part. But there was tremendous learning, and I think that's one of the key factors for smaller companies, is there's so much that the team doesn't know. And so there is greater reliance on outside consultants, and that can be good and bad.
And always expensive.
Of course, yes, always expensive. But I think the Avedro experience in particular was related to study design in some situation, in some parts, statistical analysis, lack of some of the things that were just discussed in terms of communication with the FDA on what to do early on. So all of the things that you heard, I think, are critical for small companies, and that ties into the money. You know, if you don't do those things, then you run out of money. And that's what happened with Avedro at one point. And then when there was additional investment, then they were able to move forward and do it in a way that in partnership with the FDA, and as Malvina pointed out, in partnership with the professional societies to show why corneal cross-linking was such an important clinical need for patients. That ultimately led to approval. And again, I was fortunate to just be involved in the tail end of that. And I think the difference at a large organization like J&J is we have that expertise internally for the most part. We don't rely on consultants. Many of those people are here that work internally and guide us from a regulatory perspective. They already have relationships even beyond those that we as clinicians have with leaders at the agency. Many of them serve on the various ANSI, ISO standard panels and help develop what the standards should be. So I think that partnership helps. So I think smaller companies can also try to do some of that. And then, as I think was mentioned earlier by Kuldev, use experts that have that expertise or have that relationship. So I think that's where smaller companies can get to the point of what larger companies sometimes can do by themselves.
I think that we had a audience response question at the beginning of the day. You guys may or may not have been here, that said, is working with the FDA going to get, I'm going to get the words not quite exactly right, easier, harder, or stay the same over the next 5 years, let's say? What do you think is happening in the regulatory environment? Is it where it's going to be 5 years from now? Malvina, maybe I'll ask you first. Wiley, same question.
Sure. So I guess being a scientist, you need to know what you're comparing to, right? Because when you say easier or harder, then it assumes that there's a particular baseline. And I'm assuming that everybody comes from a different experience, personal experience. So I guess I'm pausing because it's probably going to be different for each individual depending on their baseline. But overall, we're moving towards trying to maximize simplicity. I mean, that's one of our strategic priorities, and we're really putting a lot of efforts in trying to eliminate the unnecessary requests and try to simplify the language with which we communicate. Now, I want to sort of circle back to what a number of people on this podium said, which was the importance of collaboration. You know, it's not just working with FDA, because essentially FDA is not the only stopping place, stopping innovation. Innovation, everybody in this room needs to take ownership of the innovation process. Innovation cannot happen unless everybody collaborates. I'm a true believer that innovation can only happen when every single member of medical device ecosystem works and collaborates together. So coming up with appropriate endpoints, coming up with appropriate clinical trial design, getting global consensus is essential. I mean, one great example that I know I'm talking too much, but my great
Just right.
one great example would be the work we've been doing with a collaborative community on ophthalmic imaging, CCOI. That started only 5 years ago, and the idea is to expedite AI, in ophthalmic AI all over the globe. And because we have been able to be so inclusive around the globe, this has grown from a group of 10 of us to last meeting, we had 1,200 people from 49 countries and 6 continents. And we're moving from being the center of consensus globally with adding work groups with representation from, again, the new working groups that we have coming up on myopia, et cetera. I'll spare you all the details. We're going to have leads from Asia, from Europe, from India to make sure it's all inclusive.
That's great. Wiley, I'm going to give you the last word here in just a second. But I think that what I heard you say, Malvina, is one of the things that we said at the beginning of the day. This is the room in ophthalmology that is going to be who brings the next technologies forward. And if not us, then who is going to make our profession better? And it, it takes a village where there's innovators and money and even consultants and and regulators and people that say, I'm going to climb the mountain and I'm going to try and bring a bunch of people with me. And with that, I'll ask Dr. Wiley to share whatever his final words would be. Dr. Chambers.
When I joined the FDA, the ophthalmology products were regulated in the Center for Drugs and Biologics in the Division of Anti-Infective Products. The ophthalmology products then got moved to medical imaging, surgical, and dental drug products, then got moved to topical products, then got moved to anti-infectives, then got moved to anti-inflammatory analgesic and ophthalmic drug products, then got moved to anti-infectives again, then got moved to transplant and ophthalmology products, and then got moved to Division of Ophthalmology. Each time we got moved, everybody said, oh, is anything going to change with the way you regulate the products? Nothing changed during any of those moves. The name of the division changed, nothing else moved. Dr. Boyd and I have worked together for 25 years. I do not expect anything to change there now.
Very good. Thank you guys so much. You kept the audience here all day engaging. We appreciate you very much. Thank you.